Well, good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on where you're calling from. My name is Eric Friest. I'm the Adaptive Operations Advisor at Ideal, representing Acute Insight. I'd like to welcome everyone to this session where we'll be delving into communication and collaboration approaches that promote humanitarian development, peace, or HDP coherence. Before we start, we'd like to inform you that this session will be recorded and that we are providing interpretation in French. So I'd like to invite everyone to select their preferred language for this session. You can do so by clicking interpretation icon at the bottom of your Zoom screen and selecting either English or French. You can choose to mute the original audio or listen to it at a lower volume. At any time during the event, if you have any questions or comments, please use the chat box feature. And as a reminder, we opened the knowledge sharing series in June, and we are now kicking off thematic area 3, communication and coordination for coherence, with events both today and tomorrow. This session is a dynamic dialogue between the host and the interviewees and between them and you. They will spend the first 50 minutes in conversation before opening it up for others in the audience to join the conversation and share your experience and questions. You're also invited to send in your questions or comments into the chat throughout the session. And with this, please let me introduce you to Georgia Tacey, who will be our moderator for today's discussion. Georgia is based in Iraq and is the director of the Building Peaceful Futures, a consortium led by Save the Children. The consortium is a multi-sector nexus collaboration between INGOs and local organizations. And with that, over to you, Georgia.
Thank you, Eric. It's a real pleasure to be here today to talk to you all about such a critical subject. As Eric said, as someone that leads a Nexus consortium in Northern Iraq, the issue of communication and coordination is such a big issue that we wrestle with all the time, and how we communicate and coordinate with all actors along the spectrum through humanitarian development and peace building. We've had a lot of lessons of what we've done well, what we'd never do again, and hopefully when we speak to our accomplished colleagues today on the panel, we'll be able to unpack some of our learnings from across the different sectors. So let me introduce our esteemed panelists. First, we have Henok Kouendeble, is a Foreign Service Officer currently with USAID Ethiopia. He's serving as the coordinator for the USAID Ethiopia's Strategic Advisory Group for Emergencies, SAGE, while serving in the capacity as USAID Ethiopia's Disaster Risk Management Coordinator and Team Leader. We also are joined by Nathaniel Alaire-Savigny, who's based in the Democratic Republic of Congo as the head of mission for Magnum, a Slavic INGO. He also serves as the INGO Nexus focal point and as the national chairman for the INGO Forum, which has 129 members across the DRC. He actively works to support its members and link them to each other. And finally, we're fortunate to have Gwen Luke, who works for the Global Food Security Cluster and serves as the project manager for a subcomponent of the Global Network Against Food Crisis Partnership Project. This project aims to enhance coordination between HDP actors and increase synergies among the actions to further operationalise the HDP Nexus for responding to food crisis. Gwen joins us today from Rome. Henok, Nathaniel and Gwen, so glad to have you here. Before we kick off some of our questions, I guess we have had a bit of a discussion about where we want the conversation to lead today, but we're really conscious of not following the script, but following the conversation. And we're really looking for audience participation at the end of the panel discussions. We're interested in your insights and your thoughts, perhaps even your challenges to what the panel are talking about. So what we'll do is just kick off first to contextualize where each of the panel members sits within the HDP coherence and where they come from in terms of their sector and their profession. So Henok, we might start with you. If you can tell us a little about your work, the specific challenges you're responding to, and how it relates to HDP programming.
Thanks, Georgia. Good afternoon, everyone. Good morning, wherever you are. This is Henok again. I am currently serving USAID Ethiopia here in Addis Ababa. Just to give you a bit of context about our mission, USAID Ethiopia is the biggest US government mission in Africa, one of the biggest. It was more than $1.5 billion humanitarian development investment a year. So we work with diverse groups of implementing partners, government institutions, and donors to respond to the existing development needs, as well as a recurrent humanitarian crisis that often happens in this part of the world. And we often seek to meet needs and build resilience for more than 10 million years at any given year, investing for more than $500 million, particularly on development and humanitarian response. But when we respond to these needs, we understand the context is very fragile, and we also anticipate that shocks may erode our development gains that we have achieved over the years. And having a coordinated strategy or decision-making process in place is very critical to mitigate some of the negative impacts of these recurrent shocks. A good example is what happens in late 2020. Like I said, up until 2020, Ethiopia used to be one of the development space for USAID, although there are some humanitarian needs that happens every year, but the need for development and the opportunity to do development work was significant. But in 2020, we face a risk of halt in our alignment, particularly due to the war that broke out in northern part of Ethiopia. So that significantly disrupted the peace and the level of security that we have in the country. And this was challenging for our mission because shifting development resources to meet emergency need in an area where security and access are dwindling rapidly has been a challenge for us. And as you know, development resources are designed in a certain way, and shifting those resources to meet rapid onset sudden emergency need, particularly driven by conflict, is a challenge. So this required a major flexibility from USAID side as a donor, and shifting these resources to meet the rapid onset emergency was quite a challenging. So to operate in this context, what USAID did as a mission was it uses its internal strategic advisory group for emergencies, what we call SAGE. And there are two main purposes why USAID Ethiopia established this group and also utilize it. Number one is to reduce the impacts of shock on human lives and also livelihoods, because at the end of the day, we're saving lives and we're helping communities here. And number two, to ensure US government's investments and also government of Ethiopia's development gains are protected while we're dealing with this kind of humanitarian and conflict issues. What differences does this platform or SAGE makes, particularly in a conflict in crisis-sensitive development programs like ours? This platform supports conflict and crisis-sensitive decision-making across the portfolio because it brings various technical offices within the mission to come together and talk about democracy and governance, conflict issue, humanitarian issues, some of the challenges that we're facing, particularly on social cohesion aspects of it. So this brings all stakeholders, particularly within the mission, to come together and have a common understanding, common analysis, and also a shared goal and decision-making process. And the other one also fosters technical collaboration, creates a forum to regularly discuss crisis and conflicts, and also help us to be sensitive at sensitivity, or at particularly conflict sensitivity, to be a mission culture here at USAID Ethiopia. And the other one, it also just help us compress the timeline of USAID decision-making. As you know, we're a big government agency, and the fastest procurement will take like 9 to 12 months, and it's not easy, right? But this platform helped us to quickly analyze events, data, and this, all of the information that we have, and also shift resources from development to meet, emergency need in this unprecedented conflict-driven kind of crisis. But most importantly, it encouraged technical offices within USAID to collaborate, learn, and adapt in this kind of context. So it just gives us, I'm not saying we're perfectly coordinating or collaborating, but also this creates a room for us to collaborate, coordinate, and communicate better. And also at the end of the day, the information that circulates within this group help our decision-making processes better, and also it makes the life of our partners, particularly when they respond to the needs on the ground, is much easier. Maybe I'll stop there and I'll come back if there are any questions. So over to you, Georgia.
Thanks, Hanok. It sounds like you're speaking straight from a pretty dynamic environment that we and a rich experience that we will draw on later today. So thank you. So over to you, Gwen, just in a couple of minutes, if you can tell us a little about your work and the challenges you're trying to address and respond to, and how it relates to HDP programming.
Thanks a lot. So part of the Global Network Against Food Crisis Partnership Project, led by the European Union, FAO, and the World Food Programme, the Global Food Security Cluster is providing support to in-country food security cluster in 5 priority countries, namely Mali, Chad, South Sudan, Somalia, and Nigeria, to bridge humanitarian coordination system with existing development and peace-building platform or actors. Mostly activities include 5 main steps. So the first one is about the joint situation analysis, and more specifically making sure that we will give consideration of systematic drivers of hunger. And we will also include, bring in the discussion, the peace and the development partners there. The second step will be about making sure that we will have a joint mapping of HDP actors. So making sure that we know in a specific area who is there, who is doing what, using cluster tool has the 3W, who is doing what and where, or other systems. The third one is about supporting a programming and targeting alignment for a successful transition from emergency to sustainable livelihood for the communities. The fourth step is about bridging HDP partners' monitoring and learning system and making sure that we have a bridge between all monitoring systems. And the last one is about generating knowledge that will be in collaboration with scientific partners that will speak not in silo, but making sure that we will understand the systematic drivers of hunger. Thanks.
Thanks, Gwen, and it's really interesting to see how sequential and organised the cluster, how they have a really specific approach to inclusion. Particularly interested in your mapping of HDP actors, and maybe later in the discussion we can talk about how well or areas of improvement to get actors from across the spectrum involved in your cluster activities, the humanitarian actors, the development actors, and the peace building actors, and what you may have learned from that mapping experience. It's one thing to have it on a 3Ws, 4Ws. It's another thing if they're actively participating. So it'd be great to hear more of any learnings from you. So thank you very much. And I'll just pass over to Nathaniel with the same question.
Thank you very much, Georgia. So it's really in line with my 2 colleagues around the table. We have basically the same, and I think we all are here today because we have all these sites, this goal that we want to achieve, that how to address better the situation of the humanitarian needs, how to change the way of working, and how to work more closer together, not only on one pillar, the humanitarian, but with all the pillars, which is really interesting. Today I will speak more as my hat of Nexus Focal Point and chair of the INGO Forum in DRC, so not as a head of mission of Magna. The Nexus in DRC, we started in 2018 when we have been selected to be a pilot country about the Nexus Approach, and I've been involved since that moment. To make a resume or to make it simple, in DRC, the Nexus Approach will be a countdown, 5 to 0. So it's the 5 actors and actresses, which is the government, the national NGO, the donors, the UN system, and the international NGOs. So the 5 type of actors and actresses that works together in 4 collective outcomes that have been created and selected and decided all together with all the actors and the actresses. 3 It's the 3 pillars: humanitarian development and peace. 2 main conditions: a strong and accountable coordination, which is part of the big meeting today, how we can achieve that. And the second condition is about the government need to take the lead of this approach. It is really important. One goal, which is to reduce the humanitarian needs, vulnerabilities, and long-term risk while addressing the underlying factors and causes of the crisis. And the 0, it's at the very beginning. So it's really linked with everything that have been said previously, which is really, really important to have everyone. And for us in DRC, this Nexus approach is really about having everyone with the same power and same capacity around the table to discuss in all fairness about the situation. We have a national coordination, which is called the Nexus Core Team, the NCT, which is more strategic level, what we think, how we can address. And we have provincial now coordination, which is called the Nexus Group Provincial, provincial group Nexus, which is really more technical, to go deeper in the field and to have all these places. So I just gave all the portraits, so it will be easier after to talk and go more in depth with special and specific examples. So I will stop there, I think. Thanks.
Thanks, Nathaniel. I'm particularly interested in what you said around power dynamics and having everyone around the table that has equal power. I'd love to hear about that, because it's certainly a big struggle that we have in Iraq when we're looking at particularly transition at the moment from a humanitarian context into a development and social cohesion peace building context. As we're going through the transition, there's a lot of talk about transition. There's a lot of talk about it's time to now move into this area of development and peace building. However, the coordination of those actors, the funding of those actors, the communication with donors to get them ready to start supporting development and peace building, it's been a real challenge to have all the power brokers around the table. And power brokers doesn't just equal dollars, it's all actors around the table. So really keen to hear more about that later if we can. So moving on to the main body of what we wanted to talk about. Hanok, can you tell us a little bit more, just in 1-2 minutes, in terms of what role does coordination and communication play in achieving HDP coherence in your context specifically?
And if I could quickly interject just to offer a friendly reminder to our panelists to speak slowly for the interpreters to make sure that we can translate well. So thank you so much.
Apologies. We'll try.
Well noted, Eric. Thanks, Georgia. I think, looking at the themes that we're discussing here, we're talking about humanitarian development and peace nexus, right? Peace coherence. These are big issues. And what can you do without coordinating and communicating in this space? So I think in our context, we deal with so many issues. If you look at the last 3 years, we dealt with COVID-19, desert locust, conflict, regular humanitarian crisis. So I think in this kind of context, we need to have we need to have and also understand the value of regular communication and also fit for purpose coordination. You cannot operate in this kind of context by yourself. You can't operate in a silo. So there are a couple of things that we do. We rely on various mechanisms. Like I said earlier, SAGE is one of the internal mechanisms that we use to coordinate within USAID. But also we rely heavily on our partners. The cluster system that Gwen mentioned earlier plays a significant role, not only just in the food security sector, but across all sectors that we face in this kind of context. And the other one is we also use specific partners. We also have partners who have a specific skill set that will help us coordinate and communicate. Security is a good example. We have a partner who analyze, because our partners grapple with, responding to needs on the ground and dealing with these thematic issues. But also security can disrupt everything, as you all know. So we have a partner who analyze, monitors those kind of information, and also advise us as USAID, also advise our partners on, how can we become conflict sensitive? How can we operate in this ever shrinking operational environment? And also we also rely on coordination and communication among donor communities. As much as we're trying to, coordinate and communicate internally and externally, also we understand we need to communicate among donors. And you all know that the cost of donors not being coordinating, what that means. But again, what does this give us? We are responding to these huge needs in area of humanitarian development and peace issues. They're big, and we always talk about resources are dwindling, right? And the needs are ever increasing, and they're not showing any sign of abating. Now, coordination will give us the most important part is just to communicate and learn. And also just help us to avoid duplication of efforts and also overlapping activities. And that will directly impact, the pace of the operation, as well as it has a significant cost implication. So those are some of the critical aspects of coordination and collaboration. And I'm not trying to simplify. These aspects are very simple, right? It requires a day-to-day operation. Communication by itself is very complex, especially when you have layers of partners, diverse groups of stakeholders, and also the various capacity. Some of our partners may not have access to internet, or may not be able to pick up a phone and call you. But you have to navigate this environment and just ensure that you're communicating and coordinating with partners as much as possible. So maybe I'll stop there and give a chance to other colleagues to reflect. Over. Thanks.
Thanks, Hanok. I think your point about how incredibly, and I'm putting words in your mouth, but resource intensive doing, effective coordination and effective communication is incredibly time consuming. And I think sometimes we forget how much work is in it to do it well. And I think everyone would agree it's the right thing to do. We should all be coordinating. We should be avoiding duplication. We should be creating synergies. But in an environment where people are either time poor or resources poor, I think this is why these conversations are so critical, to work out some of the strategies so we don't have to keep relearning the same lessons. And whilst it won't be the same in every context, I think sometimes you're worried about oversimplifying it. Sometimes I worry we make it overly complicated, that we think that it has to be really sophisticated systems of coordination and huge mechanisms that are all funded for 5 years at a time. But I think what we know to be true is sometimes just very simple strategies keep people connected and informed. I know here in Iraq, the preferred mechanism for communicating with local partners is Facebook. That comes with a whole range of dangers and dramas at times, but it can be very simple and instantaneous. And sometimes I think we need to strike that balance between some of these amazing systems that are resource intensive, but also keep the humanity involved in how we approach it, knowing that sometimes communication can be very simple if we're deliberate about it. I also take a point of your fit for purpose communication. I think I'd really like to unpack that later on in the discussion. Anyway, thank you for that, Hanok. Over to you, Gwen. Same question. If we're looking at the role that coordination and communication plays in HDP coherence in your specific environment.
Thanks a lot. So echoing Enoch, I would say that in context of protracted crisis, we have several or multiple stakeholders that are there. So they are organized by sectors, NGOs, governmental, humanitarian development, peace. They all have a structure, a coordination mechanism, and the difficulties lies in bridging them together. And making sure that we all know each other and we can have the big picture and reconcile about and better understand who is doing what and where and how we can improve the synergy at a really local level. And also include very local actors. I'm not talking about country or sub-regional actors. I'm talking about even in Chad, we see that there is coordination structure even at the community level. There is a local comité d'action, or there is provincial action committee. We also have in Nigeria government-led coordination platform. And the idea is making sure that how we speak to each other to make sure there is coherence in those coordination platform. And creating this interaction between different actors has proven critical to map existing actors and their, of course, their intervention, but most importantly, to understand the effect of their action combined all together. So making sure there is some positive effect and synergy all together. Thanks.
Thanks, Gwen. And over to you, Nathaniel. Same question.
Super, I totally agree with Gwen and with Anak. So the coordination, clearly communication and coordination is vital part of the Nexus approach and the way of working all together. It's really important also for us in DRC to understand that the Nexus approach will not make everyone do HDP projects, but it will make everyone work together towards the same goal. So in a Nexus programming, someone can do only emergency humanitarian, pure humanitarian project that will be followed by a more early recovery project, and this will be a Nexus project because it is think and reflecting in a goal in going. So this is really important for us in this coordination and also sharing the information. I think it's important to be vocal, to be present in the meetings, just to raise the things, and small steps by small steps, it will become different. We have reviewed the humanitarian architecture in DRC in the last months, and now at the provincial level, it's in their terms of references to do a meeting every 3 months with the development and peace actors within the humanitarian actors all together to discuss on the more strategic level and everything. So even the humanitarian architecture is opening a little bit more on this HDP, sharing information and talk together and know who is there and what everyone is doing. I think also it's really important to review the tools a little bit, like you said, Georgia. In some countries, it's Facebook. In some province, it will be WhatsApp. In DRC a lot, but in a lot of places, there's no connection. So you need to move. You need to be on the ground. So you need to focus on the people on the ground that can do this kind of to share the information and to be to pass the information. So yes, I will stop there. There's always lots of things to say, but there's other questions we will be able to add information. Thanks.
Thanks, team. That was a very comprehensive answers, but right now I think we've got over probably around 100 people that have dialed in from their very busy lives to learn a little bit more about going beyond the obvious, going on beyond what our organisations say in their strategic documents, going beyond the aspirations in our donor proposals, and finding asking for a bit of a deep dive. We want people to be able to walk away today with some tangible ideas of, well, hang on, that could actually work in my context. If I just change this and change that, that could actually work. So now we're just going to move into a bit more detail around some tangible examples of, in terms of your learned experience, and they can be positive or negative, but we're looking at what structures, approaches, or practices have you observed to be highly effective, either in a structured platform like a cluster or outside a structured platform. Personally, I'm particularly interested in how we develop these strategies outside structured platforms. In my particular context, with clusters about to disband, there's this huge gaping hole for coordination where no one really knows where to go. The systems haven't been set up, the strategy hasn't been set up by the government. The donors have one foot in each camp trying to exit, but no, they can't completely exit. And there is just this massive vacuum at the moment of really planned coordination between the actors, despite everyone talking about the Nexus. So personally, I'm hoping to cut and paste some of your ideas that I hear about in a couple of minutes for my context. So we might just We might mix it up a bit because poor Nathaniel keeps going last and we'll have to keep saying, I agree with the others. So Nathaniel, we might just go straight to you, looking for a bit of a deep dive in terms of your ideas or observations in terms of replicable practices for people in the audience today.
Super, thank you very much. I will just say little points and we can go more in details if needed. The first thing that I've changed a lot is, I think it's really important when we have this multi-actors and actresses work, is to acknowledge the plus value of everyone around the table, of each type of actors and actresses. There's so much adversity and so much tensions between all of us every time. So we really need to look at the lieu commun, the things that we all link together, our common objective, and to start with that. So UN agencies, they can do things that INGO will not do, the government, the national NGO. And it's really important to work about our mandate, not starting to do everything just because there's money, but really acknowledging this is our technical, so the technical actors and actresses should go. This is strategical, we will handle it. And this is very, very important. And when it's done, it's really nice. Even if we all agree that we don't want to create new structure, heavy structure and everything, it is very important to have a place when all the actors and actresses can be around the table together and talk. In DRC, we didn't find an already existing platform that could allow those government donors, national NGO, to gather all together within the same shared of power, as we discussed a little bit before. So basically how we have created at the national level, the Nexus core team, and the same at the provincial level. I did this, but it's this way, sorry. We have 3 persons from each type of actors and actresses who represent a pillar. So for example, for an international NGO, we will have 3 persons around the table, 1 for the humanitarian, 1 for the development, and 1 for the peace. 5 type of actors and actresses, 3 pillars. So there's 15 persons around the table who are together to discuss. So they need to have the legitimacy to be there, to discuss, to take decision and to go. So this is the part. And after, those 3 persons have the major role to be sure they share the information with all the actors and the actresses of their types. So those 3 INGO persons need now to share with everyone, not only, for example, the forum members, but everyone that are not members for MSF, for example, who is never allowed to join officially the place, but to everyone, and to be sure the information is shared and is there, and that they have a way of receiving the comments and the questions of everyone, and to really have this kind of voice. And this, I think it's really, really important. We need to separate the strategic and the technical level. This is something that has been crucial in DRC in a context where the political change a lot. There's election, everyone is moving, and every 2 years you need to redo everything with a new cabinet and everything. So working on the technical, it's so important, and we need to push a lot with them because they are staying more than when a minister change, the technical persons don't change that much in DRC. So we now really put them. And the other thing that was really important, I will stop there, but there's so much to say, sorry. We had a very interesting things when we had those ambassadors that has decided to come in Kasai and Kasai Central, which is our 2 provinces pilot for the this approach, who decided to join, to come, 5 ambassadors who were there, and that's really give a kind of legitimacy to everyone, having this very high level of people coming and meeting the national NGOs, the civil society, the international NGOs there, the UN agencies, offices, and to discuss with the government, to say, okay, how it is going, what is there, how would you work together, and to really say, we are here also, we support you, you're not alone. And this has changed a lot after in the way of working. When an ambassador said something to a governor, it resonates, it makes very more powerful steps, and it's so much easier after that the technical persons and the operational persons go. So I will stop there and I will jump in later there. Thank you.
Thanks, Nathaniel. I think what really resonated with me is when you were talking about, given the diversity of actors you have around the table at any given point, is really focusing on those areas of commonality and not trying to be all things to everyone and expecting everyone's strategy and operational areas to line up, because they simply won't. And so I think it's really important to be able to narrow the scope of where there is commonality to move everyone forward. I particularly like the idea of separating the strategic and the technical, and also leveraging the power of those ambassadors or any kind of important person. It can be different in any environment, but to hold space for people that often feel, you know, it can be pretty overwhelming to be working in such complex environments, and to have people like that come and offer legitimacy and encouragement, and we see you and this is difficult and we want to support the way we can offer any support, I think also creates a sense of momentum and buy-in that's often desperately needed from that range of actors, particularly if there are power dynamics and there are some heavy hitters in the room, and some of the local civil society organisations can often feel very disempowered and a bit disenfranchised by the international system. So to have that level of engagement is a really good strategy, because often I find in my experience, when everyone is so busy, it doesn't matter if you're a donor or a government department or civil military or INGO or a local organisation, there is a little bit, when you're under stress and there's a huge amount of workload and you're very resource restricted, there is a sentiment of, okay, if I'm going to dedicate time to this, what's in it for me? What am I going to get out of this? And so you need to be incentivised either with encouragement or a sense of purpose, or you can see where your contribution is going. And so I think that's why those ambassador visits are very reinforcing. So that's a really good point. Gwen, I might hand over to you.
Thanks a lot. So very much in line with what Nathaniel just explained, one of the promising practice we've seen in several countries was to bring all the people around the same table and making sure that we are building trust among each other. And for example, in Chad and Nigeria, HDP partners organize local workshops to agree on a joint response strategy and making sure their actions are aligned with each other's. So they used the graduation approach to align their action all together, and making sure that they will lift people, household and community out of extreme food insecurity towards sustainable livelihood and avoid falling back. So graduation approach is basically deliver a package of multi-sectoral sequence intervention according to the type of vulnerability of the household and community. And from that, then we will have different actors providing different set of intervention sequence to the same population. So the main objective of the graduation approach was to bring HDP actors all together and making sure there will be an alignment in their geographical focus. So not even at admin 1, admin 2, I'm talking about more at a village level. So making sure that if an actor is doing something in one villages about access to land or access to water, and there will be a problem about land mining, then we will make sure that in this same villages, we will bring the peace actors to do an action about land mining. So it's about making sure that at a very local level, we will find the complementarity and making sure that our action will be complementary to each other. Yeah, over to you. Thanks.
That's great, Gwen. Thank you very much. And over to you, Hanouk.
Thank you, Georgia. I couldn't agree more with Gwen and Nathaniel. But again, I think one of the important aspects that Nathaniel mentioned about, the strategic and the technical aspect of things, I think we need to identify who to coordinate on what and how. We have seen our partners have different skill sets. Some of our partners have a specific a tailored skill set. For example, if we're dealing with drought or food insecurity issue in our context, we bring FuseNet to do a thorough analysis and also just brief our partners to bring everyone on the same page in terms of understanding the level of threats in the outlooks. So these kind of things really helped. And also, we also understand the limitations that we have and our partners have in terms of bringing folks to help us, negotiating access, looking at security aspect of things. So these are very important. And again, we also invest a lot on data and analysis. We have a specific activities that do work on data and analysis. A good example that we have here is we have an activity that do conduct like household economic analysis, do like a livelihood analysis. This is actually Save the Children that implements this activity. This particular activity generates this data and information, and that is primarily beneficial for our partners to make evidence-based decision-making. We believe that will make our program quality improve, as well as make our partners' program quality significantly, make change, particularly for the communities. So those are important aspects. As much as we expect our partners to generate information and data, we also share our information through fact sheets, information products, maps, and those kind of things, because communication has to be both ways. So we totally understand and acknowledge that. And then the other aspect that I want to highlight is the joint advocacy. As a donor, we listen to our partners. We bring our partners to see, hey, what are the challenges, some of the opportunities, and see across the board if there are, bottlenecks in terms of challenging all our partners. We do joint advocacy, not only with our partners, also bring, not only even donors, bring government officials to advocate on our behalf to just operations much easier. In addition to that, Nathaniel mentioned about joint monitoring with other donors, partners, but also we also jointly fund activities. There are activities that we, chip in some money from USAID with FCD or ECHO and invest on aspects of like HDP. And this actually help our partners to have that flexibility and also show solidarity among donors. So there are various best practices that we implement over the years. But again, still there are rooms for opportunities to explore areas to improve because we know that we operate in a very fluid and ever-changing context, as you all know. So that's a fact. So I'll start there and I'll give it back to Georgia. Thanks.
Thanks, Hanok. Something that really resonates with me in what you're saying is that point around knowing who to engage and when. I think all of us have been invited to meetings and big forums, and once we get there, we don't exactly realize why we're there. And then occasionally we realize we shouldn't be there at all, and we should be at a different type of meeting. So really thinking critically on who you have to engage and when. And the other point you were making around providing, really robust data, that when you are bringing people together or you are communicating via email or whatever platform you use, that you're providing evidence-based information that is credible, and through being concise and being respectful of people's time. And I believe that builds trust and momentum, and people are more likely to engage with whatever platform or the particular organisation moving forward. So I think they're really good specific strategies that we can keep in mind. Often when we're trying to be inclusive, as we should be, sometimes these forums and coordination mechanisms can be so loud and so broad that we lose a lot of people in that. And so I think that that point of being really deliberate of who you focus on and when, after you've done a very good mapping, is really, really important. So thanks for that. So the next question is more about concentrating on the P of the HDP. I think it's probably the area that many of us wrestle with the most in terms of, well, both the technical and operational ability, but also when to start sequencing and involving peace partners into programming and into the design methodology. So this question is, what types of peace programming, so it can be small p, big P, conflict sensitivity, social cohesion, trust building, those types of activities, have you seen integrated into, for want of a better term, regular programming? And what has worked well? And why do you think in those particular instances it worked well? What were the magic ingredients that they were integrated into the humanitarian and development programming? What made that particular intervention, activity, initiative successful in your eyes? So we might start off with you, Hanok.
Thanks, Georgia. I think I have a couple of points on this one. I think without getting too much into the details, USAID has a standalone activities that particularly focuses on conflict and peace building. And these are critical. But in addition to that, conflict sensitivity and do no harm principles are one of the pillars within USAID activity. And if you look at the ADS, every activity is required to have a conflict analysis and also like gender analysis and other analysis. It is one of the pillars, and we really expect our activities to harm. We expect them not to harm communities, but rather just make sure that the benefits are always outweigh the negative impacts. And particularly in a very complex context like where we operate, there is always a possibility that we might misstep and end up in a very unintended consequences. And I think this aspect is very, very critical for us. Again, you don't have to be like conflict, but we've seen humanitarian crisis eroding social cohesion among communities. And you can see communities engaged in negative coping mechanism, and you can see communities losing social cohesion. You can see humanitarian crisis causing additional vulnerability to communities to be infiltrated by, it can be violent extremism, it can be other aspects of peace disruptive behavior. So we understand this, and I think it's very critical to do a very thorough analysis and also a well-thought strategy when we plan, design, and even implement any kind of activities in this kind of context. Maybe, and I'll stop there and I'll give a chance for my colleagues to chime in. Thanks.
Thank you. And Gwen, I know in previous conversations that we've had, you were mentioning, as far as you're concerned and in your experience, that it was so essential to have peace actors involved from the very beginning of any process. So I'd really like to hear more about your perspectives on that.
I guess for the different contexts, there is no magic solution for designing any peace plan. It's really contextual. It should be very much contextualized and localized to the problematic. So one of the key lessons learned we had is starting with a conflict dynamic analysis and making sure we understand the pathway linking the conflict and the outcome, the poor food insecurity or the child malnutrition. And according to the different population, then the pathway could be very much different and then require different solution. So we have this example in Chad where the same conflict then resulted in two different outcome in neighboring population, one with increased child disease and decreased food insecurity, and the other one with less access to land and to milk. So it's about very much understanding different effect on the conflict and what are the dynamics inside the same area. Thanks.
Great, that's great, thank you. And Nathaniel, your thoughts?
Thanks. It has been a long discussion in DRC how do we be sure to have the peace pillar represented, knowing that we also have these humanitarian principles who are very, very important for the humanitarian actors and actresses, that will mean that this kind of peacekeeping actions will be very difficult to be joined in the programmation with humanitarian actors. For example, we'll never have armed escorts to go in the field. As INGO, most of also humanitarians have the same things. So it was really, really important. So we have decided collectively that it will be more about what we call the small P, the small Ps. So really the peace building, focusing on the capacity for peace within the communities, and not this peacekeeping actions and everything that will be separated of this joint vision. That doesn't mean that we reject them. There's a civil military coordination, we call the SIM card, very important in DRC in the East that we keep. The MONUSCO is involved also, but as part of the UN system and not as any very stronger actors than any other UN agencies, which is really important. So it's really about peace building in the society and the conflict sensitivity. So for example, we have an INGO, Interpeace, that have give workshop about conflict sensitivity programming. For everyone that wanted to do it, was paid by a donor. So everyone that wanted to attend, national NGO, international NGO, UN agencies, they will be able to go there, not only in conflict zone, but also everywhere in the country where we have always this kind of conflicts about the position of the ground, conflit foncier in French. Someone will translate for me, thank you. And about the community problem that you can have and everything. So the conflict sensitivity programming workshop was done, and it was really, really interesting. So yeah, I will stop there about this.
Sure. And I think some takeaways there, which we all know to be true, but need to be reminded that obviously we need to begin these things with the end in mind. And so, you know, in the height of an emergency or a humanitarian crisis, we're not often thinking about 12 months time or 18 months time or 5 years time. We're just trying to get through the week, to be honest, half the time. So I think what we know on paper is really hard to put into practice. And I think if we, because it can be quite overwhelming to think of those things concurrently. But like you were saying, Nathaniel, just making sure that we are seeing our normal humanitarian and development programming through that conflict sensitive lens is a game changer. And, you know, 15 years ago, you wouldn't see the amount of conflict sensitivity training or, you know, technical tools on conflict analysis the way that we're seeing now. And just like over the last 10, 15, 20 years, you know, gender mainstreaming became just a standard. I would hope to see that in these types of contexts that we're all being trained and given the tools to approach our humanitarian and development work. It's just that we'll have muscle memory for approaching everything in a conflict sensitive way, to be more mindful of where the development programming will end and peace building should commence. Now, moving on, because I'm just conscious of time, I think what we want to talk about next is the challenges, just being really frank about, you know, maybe 1 or 2 challenges that you've faced in coordination and communication. And if we can be as specific as possible, you know, whether it was about buy-in, whether it's about the language we use and the lexicon in our industry, whether it was about capacity or the expertise of field staff or senior staff, what have been our major challenges in terms of coordination and communication across HDP, and how in your experience have they been overcome? So what we're looking at here is some cause and effect. What were your biggest pain points that you actually had a successful outcome in turning around? So I might go straight to you, Hanok.
Thanks. I think we directly face this kind of things, particularly in the last 2 years. But I think I'll be very brief. I mean, we all know that there is a growing global competing needs around the world. We have a major humanitarian crisis in the heart of Europe, in addition to the existing major recurrent and sometimes rapid onset crisis around the world. And this is putting pressure on the available resources. We're all accessing resources from a specific bucket. And I think the need is so high and we're competing to access these resources. And I think this is pressuring not only donors and partners, but also even communities to access the help they need. And this calls for actually a better coordination, a robust coordination, and also a coordination that makes responses cost effective in addition to being effective, so efficient. So I think those are one critical aspect. The other one is shifting priorities. I mean, we've seen some dynamics in Europe, like the Brexit, some donors are shifting priorities, and that is also putting additional pressure. Of course, some donors are very gracious enough to fill these gaps. But again, without coordination, you won't be able to even fill these gaps. So I think it is very critical to see this aspect and maintain, pay attention to some of these dynamics that are happening outside our context, but also have a direct impact on what we do on the ground. And the other one is just a lack of same level of commitment to coordinate and communicate among all partners. And I think as a donor agency, we expect our partners to communicate and coordinate regularly, but also we try to hold ourselves accountable to coordinate with other donors as well, just to make sure that things are happening in a robust way, or at least like resources are being mobilized smoothly in a very accountable and a timely manner. So I think those are some of the challenges that we're facing, and also some of the things that we do just to turn around some of these dynamics. So I'll stop there and give a chance for other colleagues. Thanks.
Just to hold your feet to the fire a second, Henok, when you're talking about, it's your expectation and responsibility to make sure that your partners are in fact coordinating, knowing that buy-in is difficult to get in some environments. What are the strategies that you use to ensure, or have ensured, that your partners are actually in fact meaningfully collaborating and coordinating?
So I think I've served in various missions prior to my assignment in Ethiopia. I personally use various mechanisms. I mean, I attend clusters and see like who is attending and who is sharing information, who is very analytical, who is very open to not only make their own activity better, but also other partners around them to be better. I think one of the USAID's priority is just building local capacity. And then we build local capacity not only by training teachers or a household, but also by trying to help local NGOs to access USAID's resources to be able to respond to their community needs. And this is, we believe, we pay attention to some of our partners, who is empowering who. And these are, I think, very, I'm not saying like we have all the eyes and ears, but I mean, there are platforms. I mean, Gwen and Nathaniel mentioned, we have like various platforms and meetings and stuff. And they are set up for purposes. People don't randomly make a group and like, hey, we have a food security cluster, and we're like, let's meet here. They are doing that for a purpose. And we expect whoever is doing in that sector needs to participate, and not only participating, but also add value to that platform in terms of data, in terms of analysis, in terms of supporting, collaborating. Because if there is an assessment, we don't want just partner X to go to this remote area and do the assessment. We want other partners to chip in terms of resources, in terms of expertise, in terms of a skill set to come in and just make that analysis robust. Because at the end of the day, we all use it, and also the impact will be significant on all of the activities that we do just in that shared context. So I'll stop there. I hope I answered your question, but this is to say, I mean, there are ways.
There are ways. Sounds ominous. But I do think, yes.
Can I step in and just continue on the head-up intervention? Super, thank you. I think it's really interesting and so important, this question and this point. And I wanted to say that in DRC, having this forum, the INGO forum, has helped a lot to be able to talk for the collective and not only for actors and actresses. So having the forum sit in, so someone from the Secretariat that we have, or someone who is elected by the members to represent the collective, it gives a legitimacy and a someone to that will handle this kind of situation and the speech, but will talk for 140 members, and not only for themselves. And this has helped a lot for smaller structures who have only few persons who do everything, It's so difficult to have resources to go, but you have sometimes you can give an input and you know that someone will share it and will go and will make it happen. So for us, this coordination, this forum has strongly been an answer to one of this problem, to be sure that everyone as INGO will be heard and goes no matter how the structure is big or small, if you have someone fully paid to do it, or if it's only volunteering time. Thanks.
Thanks, Nathaniel. While you have the microphone, why don't we move to you in terms of specific, maybe just one additional challenge that you faced in terms of coordination and how you turned that situation around?
Yes, there's so much challenges, so I will just choose one. I would say that our biggest challenge, or the one that has been long to address, is how to involve the national NGOs in the coordination at the national level, even at the provincial level. In DRC, you have billions of national NGO civil society group. I'm laughing a little bit with the numbers, but thousands and thousands of them, and they don't have one national platform to have a voice. So it's really important to find a way how will persons represent them at the national level that is not persons that are political engaged in, but really about the civil society and the national NGO. It takes time, and basically what we have done, we have found money through it was the integrated office of the UN, who have decided to give the money to the national NGO to have this big meeting in Kinshasa with remote connections in different provinces to discuss all together different sub-platforms that came together to say, okay, who can be there? How will we have the information? So it's not about choosing them, which is really dangerous. We need to let them choose themselves, but we also need to be sure that guidelines are okay, that it will not be just political or linked to a government and everything. So to give this kind of tool, saying this is what need to be done, this is the resources, do it yourself, and we're waiting. And basically they invited us also to discuss about the Nexus, what it is. We did a small workshop. So this was really interesting because it's so difficult and it was a good way to do it. Thanks.
That's a great example. Thanks, Gwen. Over to you.
So definitely agree with challenges mentioned by Enoch and Nathaniel. If I had to add only one, it will be about the joint getting data for the joint situation analysis. So in terms of who is doing what and where, so making sure that we will understand beyond admin 2 or admin 3, really on the ground, who is doing what and where, but also in terms of data sharing mechanism, making sure that we have secure and harmonized data sharing mechanism that allow each partner to share the understanding of the real problem, the situation, but also the response. Thanks.
Thanks, Gwen. That's really helpful. Now, I'm just looking at the clock and I think we're around kind of on time, but now we want to hear a little bit more from our audience in terms of your experiences, and also want to hear some of your questions. But just to start off, we want to ask you what surprised you from that conversation in terms of, did it resonate, did it not? But we want you to take some time to write your responses in the chat, but do not send it yet. This is quite sophisticated. So we call this format the chat storm. Once I say send, your responses will storm the chat, and it gives everyone time to think without being influenced by the other responses in the chat. So if you just take 1 or 2 minutes, or probably not even that long, to write down some of your insights or some of your reflections and surprises from the conversation we've had today. And when I say send, if you could press the button. Thank you. Okay, so we'll just give everyone about 10 more seconds. All right, if everyone could please press send. Okay, so what we're going to do is there's some questions that have come through and some comments. So yes, Piers saying that it's fascinating and not surprising that the panelists all have very similar challenges. You would be interested in how a collective challenge identification could be compiled to co-create a shared action plan to address those challenges. Oh my goodness, yes. And I'll just look at that next question before I go to the notes. How do you think you could make self-sustaining, durable communication platform between different stakeholders? Ooh. Okay. Now, maybe does anyone on the panel want to answer or speak to the question of how do you think you could make self-sustaining, durable communication platform between different stakeholders?
I'll jump in, and I will give two examples that we are putting in place now in DRC. One of the things is we have a reflection about having in those provinces who don't have major humanitarian needs. We know that the major of the humanitarian needs linked to the conflicts is based in the east, even if we have so much vulnerabilities about in all the countries. But we are thinking that the Nexus Group Provincial can become the new structure linked to the humanitarian architecture to give feedback about the situation. So we will create in the humanitarian architecture in provinces when we are not in open conflicts anymore, the chance to switch the humanitarian coordination for an HDP group at the provincial level that will be the main interface for the national humanitarian architecture, the HCT, humanitarian country teams. So this is one thing we are trying to do and to think how we can make it last. And the other things is even if we have created this Nexus core team at the national and the Nexus Group Provincial at the provincial, we are working with the technical thematic group about the collective outcomes. And those group, we have decided to create them within the government structures who already have this kind of thematic group of reflection and technical group. And we just opened up to have all the actors and actresses being able to be together and to share information and to talk about this kind of things, and really make sure that the strategy that we will have in this province or this area makes sense, and not only at the national level. So this is the two things we are trying to do to make the things integrated in the system. Yeah, and therefore more self-sustaining than just creating something apart. Thanks.
Thanks, Nathaniel. And while we have you, there's a specific question from Lisa asking, you speak of Nexus programming working when one actor who does exclusively humanitarian work is followed in the same area by another who does recovery and resilience. The question is, how does the actual practice of arranging reasonably timed coordination and sequencing or layering work? How do different organizations and donors make this work, in your experience?
Yes, in the Nexus Group Provincial, basically, we start with the mapping of all the actors and actresses. So even of the donors, even of the government actions and everything. So we do a mapping, like Gwen I've said previously, of what is everyone doing in the short and mid-term. So this is really important. Then we have already a mapping of the programming, knowing, for example, the World Bank will start a nutrition project in 2.5 years. We have this emergency project that is already funded and everything. So we have a non-complete map of all the action that already exists. And then the technical group with all the actors and actresses will look, okay, to achieve the collective outcomes, what is missing in these sectors to be sure that we will be able to address this objective. So for example, okay, we already have nutrition project, prise en charge of malnourished children. We have a World Bank nutrition that will come in 2.5 years. So basically we have 1 year in between those projects with nothing. It's not possible. Let's create something to start with this base community nutrition project to get out of this very humanitarian approach, to work at the community level. And when the World Bank will arrive, the community will already be organized and to start there. So this is really this kind of things. You need to have what does what when, and basically what will we need to address to achieve the goals. And then you have the technical level. This is the steps where we are now in DRC. We are starting to do it. It's very, very challenging. Everyone also wants to propose things that they will do. And this is important to refocus on who should do it. So if it's community-based, it should be national NGO. It shouldn't be donors themselves or UN agencies. So it's really like, let's keep focusing on the big picture. It's not about taking money, but really to achieve the objective. And yeah, so I would say that this is how we are doing right now. And this is where we are now in DRC at this very step in the Kasai Central, and in Tanganyika, which is the 3 provinces pilot. Thanks.
Thanks, Nathaniel. That's really comprehensive. I don't know if anyone else wanted to weigh into that one.
Yeah, maybe if I can come in, can you hear me? Yeah, okay, great. So I think a couple of things for us, it's very difficult to invest or at least engage in recovery work and in a context where the front line is constantly shifting, because that is a kind of jumping the gun sometimes. But again, we're not shying away from identifying opportunities to do recovery works. There are, within even a conflict context or within a context of crisis, there are opportunities to do recovery work. So we completely acknowledge that. And I think as a USAID, what we do is we give as much flexibility as possible to our partners to have some kind of resources set aside within a particular contract to engage in some kind of recovery operations when the opportunity arises. Of course, there are some activities that are purely emergency response, but also there are many activities that has that flexibility built in the contract. And the other one is in recent year, for example, at least in the last 12 months that I've seen here in Ethiopia, is bringing non-traditional donors. For example, if you notice, World Bank is coming big way in the humanitarian recovery space, and they haven't been investing that much money, but they're coming to invest in recovery, reconstruction, and also even humanitarian responses in this aspect. So we are advocating for partners like that to come and provide resources for our implementing partners to engage in recovery work while maintaining their commitment to respond to emergency needs and other resilience work that they do on the ground. Over.
While we have you, Hinok, there's a question from Lisa asking how USAID encourage or ensure that the necessary sequencing, layering and integration, data analysis sharing, learning across multiple activities and NGOs in any given context. How does USAID go about ensuring that?
So I think a good example is SAGE. In a SAGE group, we have all technical offices, whether those offices are funding emergency response or recovery or long-term development work. It can be across sectors. We have, folks from education office, health office, economic growth, humanitarian response, development, resilience, and all of those things. And even our contracting officer, financial officers, and front officer decision-making body in the mission come and sit in that conversation. So there is a constant exchange of information, but also traditionally in USAID, when we do design activities, you are required to bring people from different offices and bring them to be a design body. So there is people who are managing another activity, but providing support in the design of a new activity. So there is this interbreed and intercommunication and exchange of ideas, informations, and what that does is it just collectively bring those expertise within the mission, and also help us to start synergizing our activities from the onset. Of course, in addition to that, we do have SAGE dashboards that will show USAID's investment in a particular provinces. Our dashboard shows, if you click it, it will show you how many health activities, which partners, how much resources, how much beneficiary that activity or USAID is investing in that particular location. So we have different mechanisms and platforms that we use to maximize efficiency, synergy, and layering and sequencing as much as possible within the mission. But that's not enough in this kind of context, right? We have other donors investing similarly. So you also need to do sequence and layering with other donors as well. A good example that I brought earlier was joint funding with other donors. Probably the need might be significant, and the investment that USAID may have for that particular response might not be sufficient, right? So we bring in other donors to just co-fund things and be able to respond to the needs on the ground. So again, I'm not trying to draw the picture here as rosy, but those are some important aspects that we always maintain and keep in our mind as we design, as we implement, as we fund, and as we respond to the needs on the ground. Over.
Thanks, Hinok. That was super comprehensive. Now, I'm interested to talk a little about government, because there's a question here about how we integrate interventions with government. And I'm not sure, Gwen, if this is something that you've had experience with in your context, but the specific question is, how do you manage to integrate interventions with the government? Do you have a framework for designing and implementing joint programs with the government? And if so, are there any lessons from that?
Yes, thanks a lot. So I have two examples from Chad and from Nigeria. And definitely from Nigeria, we involved the government from the very beginning at all levels and making sure they are taking the driver's seat. So meaning that at governmental level, we have the right discussion, making sure that we target the area, the most vulnerable area altogether, and at states level, so in Northeast Nigeria, making sure that we strengthen the relationship between the leading ministries. So when doing the workshop, we made sure that the leading state ministry were coordinating the joint response plan, and were also empowered to have this role. So, and in Chad, we also at each level of the state and government make sure that we involve the government counterpart. So at the prefect level, the governor and also the ministry, the relevant ministry, were all involved to clear the action plan and make sure that they are also involved in all the steps. And that's also one of the key for sustainability of those coordination platforms.
Thanks, Gwen. Sorry, that was just a bit of technical. Did someone else want to jump in?
Yeah, thank you. In DRC, we had two things that had helped a lot. The first is the involvement of the HCRC DSRSG, so the triple hats, humanitarian coordinator, resident coordinator, and deputy special representative of the Secretary General of the UN system, who is a high-level position in the UN system that has helped a lot to help us connect with the Prime Minister, with the presidency, to be sure that they understand the Nexus approach and the importance for the government and the ministers to be involved at the political and technical level. So we had this, I think it's a strong involvement that has helped to have this government involved. And the other one, it was really interesting, is in this mapping, this 3, 4, 5, 6 Ws that we have done, we asked everyone, even the humanitarians, to link their interventions to the national development plan and the provincial development plan. And that was really interesting for the governor, for example, in a province, to understand that the humanitarian actions are basically already helping the development plan. And it's not, nothing is separated. And basically humanitarians are fulfilling and helping and developing the countries also. And using this provincial development plan that is done by the province, by the governors and the ministers, and help and shows that we are collaborating to this plan has helped a lot to have their buy-in and to support the intervention and to see that we already are working in the same line as them. Thanks.
Thanks, Nathaniel. Lisa has asked a really great question that's close to my heart, and I'll open it up to the entire panel to see if anyone has a response. So Lisa's question is, so we're all external actors here. For people in the community itself, a label of H or D or P is not so relevant as it seems to be for us as external actors or donors. Do you have practical examples of what you are doing to develop that muscle memory for peace building, ability to analyse and then to act at the community level with local civil society actors? I had a very beloved local partner once who attended a meeting with me and a whole range of other actors, saying it felt like he needed the Rosetta Stone to really interpret and understand what any of us were really talking about. And we often get teased, and rightfully so in my opinion, for speaking in our acronyms and lexicon and elven language that doesn't always or often translate to our local communities. So I guess we're looking for examples of where you've been able to either translate that language or simplify your approaches to make sure that the whole concept behind HDP is really understood and practiced at a community level in a meaningful way. I'll leave that open to anyone on the panel.
If I may jump in. So yeah, definitely HDP doesn't mean anything for at community level. And I guess it's also another way of working is about building program on community knowledge themselves and not about applying our principle on communities, and making sure that we will include community knowledge that have historical knowledge on how to resolve conflict, but also on development and also forecasting of shocks. So it's about also including qualitative methods to make sure that we will ask community what they will want and how they will combine all those actions together.
That's great. Thank you, Gwen. Does anyone else have anything to add about how you translate the concept into practice at a community level?
Yeah, I will just add that is exactly why we need to have all the actors and actresses around the table. The civil society is there, therefore it's easier for them to talk with the community, to talk for the community, and they have this really, really key role in the Nexus approach and DRC, and this is very, very important. And that's why I was talking about power. We need people around the table who are not implementing partners of the people around, which will make them very difficult sometimes to talk or to say things contrary to the people that feeds them and give the money. So it's really important to keep this power balance in mind. And I think it's one of our role as external actors at every moment. And the other thing is most of the projects now in the Nexus approach, but in lots of provinces, they have this community committee to discuss about what is going on in the community, what is their challenges. So even if you're doing a protection project on sexual survivors, SGBV survivors, even then you will have a committee talking about everything, about food security, about nutrition, and to have the information of what they think is the main things that you need to do. And then you will work with them, with the civil society, with the national NGO to advocate so they can have this problematic answered or served and everything. So it's not a promise to do everything about this committee. It's really important, and if not, it will do more harms than good. But this is the kind of things that we are doing now, and makes them more active in the reflection of the actions. Thanks.
Thanks, Nathaniel. Now, we have a question that we might flick to you, Henok, first, from Mara, saying, given the costs of coordination and communication, for example, time and resources, how do you cover the cost? Do donors recognise and pay for it specifically, especially with peace building, including training and advocacy? So I might start with you, Henok, from a donor perspective. Do you in fact fund it and resource it and support agencies to apply for it? And then we might speak to some of our implementing partners about that.
Yes, I think we acknowledge that, like I said earlier, we know the value of these things. We know the value of coordination, and we also understand coordination is not free. It won't come freely. And over my years of experience, I've seen, I don't know, I haven't seen any mission that doesn't support INGO Forum, or that doesn't support cluster systems, that doesn't support various coordination bodies. But also, that is not the end, right? We need to also support, studies, analysis, and data. I'm not an advocate of doing studying one particular subject every 6 months, but also I totally understand the value of data and analysis in a particular context, because particularly when we work in a fluid context like ours, like most parts of the world these days, you need to have that analysis, that data, because a lot of things are moving in the space that we operate. And of course, as a donor, we understand that, we support that. And we also encourage our partners to be able to make decisions based on data and analysis, and also coordinate. Again, this is to say, yes, we acknowledge that, we invest on that, and we also use that. Of course, not all the coordination bodies may not be sufficient to the level that we want in some contexts. There might be some limitations where in some aspects, for example, we might be able to invest more in coordinating some specific sectors, but there's some other sectors might not be a priority in some context. But again, I think that aspects of coordination is always there, and there is resources and also commitment from our end to make sure that it's there, because they are pillars. Coordination is a pillar of a particular operation. We totally understand, and we, like, again, to iterate, it won't come for free, so we know that.
That's music to our ears, Henok. I might get that written on a t-shirt. And I like how, you're making quite the point of saying that, yes, donors, and particularly USAID, will resource the coordination platform, but you feel just as passionate about resourcing research and data analysis to be able to inform that platform. So that's a really great point to make. Did Nathaniel or Gwen, did you have anything you wanted to add to that before we move on?
Yes, just maybe sometimes it feels a little bit like the chicken or the egg situation. I'm not sure if it's the same expression in English that it is in French. Super. So sometimes you need to start the coordination on your volunteering time and to start to do something, and then they see the needs, and then it's easier to fund. In the Nexus approach, we were alone, we were working on weekends and on nights to try to reach some things, and then some donors start to see that there was a need and wanted to be to go, and then you find a way to fund. For example, the Swede the Swede have decided to fund, but they cannot fund directly, for example, for national staff that will become expert in the Nexus approach in the different provinces. So they go through a project they already have with an INGO that they add these resources, and the INGO decided to accept to do it. So there's always a way to find that will make it happen. But you need to prove the needs and to prove that it's working sometimes. So yeah, just that I wanted to add. Thanks.
And yeah, I 100% agree that often you do it out of your own time first to get momentum. And something that I talk to my partners quite a lot in my consortium is collaboration is an attitude as much as a practice. And so you can have a funded platform where everyone is paid to come together, but it doesn't actually mean that they're genuinely collaborating and coordinating in a meaningful way. And when done well, it can be quite the catalyst for reciprocity. And so I really like the fact that we make a point and be deliberate about naming that coordination and communication is the opposite of being passive. So I think we've all been to different types of fora. We turn up and one person from one agency just sits quiet in the corner, takes notes and leaves. That to really promote active engagement and coordination and collaboration is a real deliberate effort and an attitude as much as an expertise. So we might just ask, have we got one more question before we move on? Gwen, did you have anything in particular you wanted to add to that last question around communication and coordination?
I guess I'm definitely aligned with my two co-panelists. Thanks.
Sure. Okay, we might move on to, because we really want to hear from anyone in the audience that is brave enough to share your experiences with us. We'd love to hear about anyone else's experiences, good or bad. Tell us about your coordination and communication efforts, what's working, what isn't. We've got a couple of minutes to hear from people, and we're probably getting sick of, you're probably getting sick of our voices, so we'd love to hear from you. So we'll just open up the floor to anyone that may want to contribute. Come on, we want to hear from you. Well, if everyone's being very shy, I might just go back to my panel and ask all of you, given all the conversations we've had before today and throughout the conversation with each other today, if there were 1, 2, 3 key takeaways based on the dialogue today that you are going to walk away with and that potentially other people could walk away with, what would that be? So Hanok, in terms of 1 or 2 key takeaways from today?
I think one is, we operate in a very complex and dynamic environment, and I think flexibility is needed from donors, and also adaptability is needed from our partners as well, to be able to adapt the context and just focus on the results, but also maneuver through all the challenges that we're facing on a day-to-day basis, be it coordination, be it communication, resource scarcity, and other challenges that we all face in this kind of context. The other one is evidence-based decision-making processes. I think that supported by data and analysis improves program quality, and also and make our programs cost efficient. And I think that is very critical. I mean, we all know that data and analysis not only used for our existing activity, but also it will help us for future planning as well. So I think investing on those kind of things will definitely help, particularly track our results and the impacts that we're making on the ground. Another one is coordination and communication plays a vital role. We all say our discussion over.
So we just missed you just broke up a little bit, Hanok there. Can you just repeat that last sentence, your last point? You said coordination and communication.
I said communication, the coordinations are very vital, particularly in a fluid context like where we operate, and that they're very critical in all aspects, and they're not free, and we have to invest on them. We don't expect partners to coordinate or communicate without investing on those aspects. But again, understanding their relevance, and also one of the pillars in operations, any kind of operations, right? So I just want to highlight that over.
Thanks, Hanok. So Gwen, what stands out for you from today's discussion?
I guess from all of our experience, it seems that we all agree that the joint mapping of HDP actors can be a good way, or pave the way for improved coordination. That will be one point, and the second one will be as much as feasible and as granular as possible would be to involve government and local actors in the entire process. Over to you, Daniel.
Thanks. I have more than 2, but I'll try to go fast. The first thing I think we need to acknowledge that basically we have failed privacy in the last decades. So I think we need to start with the fact that we cannot continue to do how it was and how it is right now. So it means that we will all need to change some of the things, the way we do the operations, the way we fund them. So there's a big steps of changing in minds and ways of working. And this for me is the first step, because it means that at some points, we will need to be out of a comfort zone and the things that we have done all the time. The second thing for me is really to have everyone around the table. And in DRC, it's really our keystone to do it. And it's really, really important. And for many, many reasons, but also because when you have everyone around the table, it's kind of flatten the power balance within the type of actors and actresses. Having the donors around the table will help assure, for example, that the government part will not choose a zone to intervene just because it's where they are born or things like that. And I think the government part will be sure it's not only for the agenda of the donors and the countries in between. And so everyone is kind of balanced and counterbalance the power in the decision. And I think it's really, really strong. We didn't talk about it, but I think it's important. How will we institutionalize the achievements of every step within our own organizations to be sure that in 2 months, the new person coming will not ask and we will restart exactly where we were 2 years ago. And this is for me a key things that we need to achieve and to do. And to be sure to give the tools and to strengthen the institutionalization of the achievements that we have done. And I totally agree with Enoch about this coordination, which is capital, same thing with Gwen. So for me, it needs to be a more accountable coordination to everyone, this 360 evaluation, and knowing that coordination is really about the soft skills, which take more time to develop and to go. So it's really important to have the good persons at a good place or to help them treat or develop these soft skills because it's the kind of persons that change everything in coordination. And I think we all agree with that. Thanks a lot. And sorry for the more than two.
No, they were great. So to summarize, I think to capture what you were all just saying, we talked about flexibility from all actors and donors, that we need evidence-based decision-making processes, that coordination and communication is vital in such a fluid and changing context, that coordination is not free and we need to invest in it, that joint mapping of HDP actors can pave the way for more effective coordination, that we have to involve government and local actors at every step of the way. We have to acknowledge that we failed, that we need to change the way that we operate and the way that we fund coordination and collaboration, that we need everyone around the table, especially if we're going to walk the talk around inclusion and localization, and the ongoing challenge of how we all institutionalize the achievements and the lessons learned in our own massive organizations. We need to be more accountable, and something that really speaks to my heart is developing and celebrating and rewarding those soft skills in our lead coordination people, because it's so dependent on those particular humans to really respond to the different needs of the individuals and the organizations that they're coordinating. Certainly from my perspective, in terms of my takeaways, it's just really reinforcing how deliberate we need to be about coordinating and collaborating, that it needs to be nuanced, and we can't just cut and paste from one context to another. That we need to begin with the end in mind, especially across the nexus. And we need to pay particular attention to what is culturally appropriate and making sure that we're not just in echo chambers with ourselves, speaking our own secret language, and that we are able to communicate effectively with local actors and local community members. So with that, I would just like to thank our panel of Gwen, Nathaniel and Henoch. It's a huge time investment and we really appreciate you sharing your time in the lead up to this conversation, and also your being so open with your expertise and your lessons in this discussion. We really look forward to hearing about your adventures in the coming year, and just wanted to thank you all and wish you well. So I'll hand over to Eric.
Excellent. Thank you so much, everyone. Henoch, Nathaniel, and Gwen, very valuable insights. So greatly appreciate your participation in this session. And Georgia, thank you so much for your very able guidance in guiding the conversation. So I thought it was a fascinating conversation. We are almost out of time, but before we let people go, we'd love to hear your thoughts on how this session went so that we can improve our future events. So in the chat, you'll see a link to a short survey. If you could take it, it should take less than 2 minutes to complete. So we welcome your thoughts so that we can make sure that we're using our own data to help improve our work moving forward. So A friendly reminder, if you haven't yet registered already, please register for our second session tomorrow from the thematic area of communication and coordination. The session is going to be focused on learning from backbone mechanisms to advance HDP coherence. So we will have our very own Corinne Garnier from USAID's Bureau of Humanitarian Assistance, who will be moderating the session among 3 chiefs of party of backbone mechanisms that will be focused in the resilience learning activity in Kenya, East Africa, the Sahel collaboration and communication activity, as well as the Karamoja Resilience Support Unit in Kenya. So please stay tuned for that, and we hope that you can join the conversation in the same link that is shared in the chat. You can also find upcoming events at the end of the month under the thematic area of the knowledge sharing series, which is sequencing, layering, and integrating humanitarian development and peace assistance. I know this is this topic is of keen interest because there were several questions in the chat on this. So please stay tuned for that, and I hope you can join us then. So thank you guys once again from wherever you happen to be joining from. We're going to keep the Zoom meeting open and play some music in the background as you complete the survey. Again, the link of that is in the chat. And thank you for joining us, and we hope to see you tomorrow. Bye, everybody.
Thank you all. Take care. Thanks.
you.